right, let's do it. We're diving deep today into a world, well, most of us only see in the movies. We've got court documents, we've got trial summaries, all about bringing down the Gambino family.
Yeah, this is 91, the big REO indictment against John Gotti, his underboss, Frank Lucascio, and of course, you can't forget Salvatore Gravano, Sammy the Bull.
I gotta be honest, whenever I hear Ryko, my eyes kind of glaze over. It's like, yeah, organized crime, bad guys, but what makes it so different?
See, most prosecutions, you're taking out a foot soldier here, a lieutenant there. Arco, you go after the whole structure. Like,
Yeah.
you're not just stopping a crime, you're dismantling that business of crime.
So it's about the money, more than just jail time.
Exactly. Seizing assets, crippling their finances. That's how you truly break a group like the Gambinos.
And that's why they went after Gotti's lawyer, right? Bruce Cutler, trying to disqualify him before the trial even started.
Oh, that's a huge move. You don't do that lately. They had to prove Cutler was so conflicted he couldn't represent Gotti fairly.
Well, Gotti himself was recorded griping about how much he paid Cutler to represent other Gambino guys, like hundreds of thousands of dollars.
House counsel, basically. So is Cutler working for John Gotti, the individual, or the Gambino family's interests? That's a problem.
But what really sunk Cutler wasn't just the money, it was. They had him on tape, in the room, while Gotti's talking about crimes.
That's the game changer. Now, Cutler's not just a lawyer, he's a potential witness. Imagine that jury seeing him, knowing he heard the same stuff they just did.
Yeah, that's not good. All right, let's get to the good stuff. The Ravenite Social Club, or more specifically, the apartment above it.
Ah, the Ravenite. This wasn't just a hangout spot, it was the inner sanctum, and the feds had it wired for sound, top to bottom.
So every conversation, every shady deal, the FBI was listening.
This is how they learned the Gambino family's playbook. The hierarchy, the lingo, how they operated day to day. Gold mine for the prosecution.
And then you've got Sammy the Bull, Gravano flipping, testifying against Gotti and Locascio. Talk about betrayal, right?
Cooperating witness, always a tricky thing. Gravano's testimony was invaluable. He could explain the context of those recordings, but, of course, the defense is going to try to paint him as a rat, a liar trying to save his own skin.
Okay, so we have Gotti on tape and Sammy the Bull singing like a canary. Where does that leave Locascio, the underboss?
This is where it gets tricky. He's saying, look, I was in the Ravenite, but I wasn't always actively part of those conversations.
Hold on, can they get you just for being in the room while crimes are being discussed?
Not that simple. They had to prove Locascio wasn't just some passive observer, that as underboss, him being there meant something, that even subtle comments, they showed his involvement.
So it's about proving his presence wasn't just a coincidence. Interesting. Gotti also had issues with the way the judge was instructing the jury, right? Saying it was too vague.
Jury instructions, those are vital. It's the framework for how they decide the case. Gotti was worried because the RAKO charges, he claimed, the wording made it too easy to convict him for stuff other Gambinos did, even if he didn't know about it.
So even as the boss, he's trying to say, hey, not my fault if some guys went rogue. Clever, but did it work?
Not really. Judge said the instructions were fine, and ultimately the jury found Gotti and Locascio guilty on most charges. It does raise the question, how far does that responsibility go in a family like this?
We've already learned so much. The indictment, the players, the legal wrangling. I can't wait to get into the nitty-gritty of the crimes themselves.
We're just getting started. Buckle up, because this is going to get even more fascinating.
Okay, let's get into it. What kind of crimes are we talking about here? The Ravenite tapes, they got to have more than just guys talking tough.
Oh, way more. It's a full-blown criminal operation they're running. And one of the big ones that came out, the murder of Paul Castellano.
Castellano, he was the head of the Gambino family before Gotti, right?
You got it. And on the tapes, you hear Gotti talking about the hit, why he wanted Castellano gone. It's chilling stuff, you know? Really shows how ruthless Gotti was. But Castellano, he wasn't the only victim. The prosecution had evidence tying Gotti to the murders of Thomas Bellotti, Robert DiBernardo, Liborio Maluto.
It's eliminating rivals.
Yeah.
Got to stay on top, right?
Yeah.
But there was also that obstruction of justice charge, right?
Right. The recordings revealed discussions about another trial, Thomas Gambino, possibly related to John. They were trying to influence the outcome, you know, pull some strings.
Yeah, trying to rig a trial while they're already on trial. The audacity. What about Locascio? What specifically did they have on him?
He might not have been giving the orders, but the prosecution argued his position as underboss, being present at those meetings at the Ravenite apartment. That made him complicit. Those weren't just casual get-togethers. They were actively planning criminal activities. And Locascio, he contributed to those discussions, gave his input. You could tell he was involved.
So it wasn't just about being there. It was about being a part of the planning. Makes sense. Beyond the murders, the obstruction, what else were these guys into?
Oh, you name it. The recordings exposed a lot. There were discussions about a pretty big gambling operation in Connecticut, for one, how it was structured, the profits, even how they intimidated people to make sure it ran smoothly.
Classic mob stuff. Gambling, always got to have a hand in that.
And loan sharking. They provided loans at crazy high interest rates and used threats and violence to get their money back. They were preying on vulnerable people. Desperation, that's their bread and butter.
Pretty dark stuff. You got to admit, it's kind of impressive how much the FBI was able to uncover. It wasn't just about catching them saying incriminating stuff. It was about really understanding how their whole operation worked.
Right. The tactics, the hierarchy, their blatant disregard for the law, they got it all on tape. And speaking of the law, remember Gotti challenging the jury instructions? He was worried the RA2 charges could mean he'd get convicted for things he didn't even know about. He was trying to separate himself from his underlings.
Trying to say, hey, I'm the boss, but I can't control everything everyone does. So what happened? Did that argument fly?
The judge wasn't buying it, said the instructions were clear and fair. It does make you think, though. How do you draw the line in an organization like the Gambino family? When does leadership end and individual actions begin?
Yeah, it's got to be a tough call. So all this evidence, Sammy the Bull's testimony, what was the final verdict?
Guilty. Both Gotti and Locascio on most of the charges. And with Archeo, the penalties are serious, like really serious.
All right, so guilty verdicts, Archeo charges. What did that mean for Gotti and Locascio?
Life sentences. No parole. Spent the rest of their days behind bars.
Wow. A message sent, for sure. But this was, the early 90s? How much does a Gambino trial even matter today?
Well, you might think pinstripe suits and social clubs are a thing of the past, right? But organized crime? Oh, they're still around. Just, they've modernized a bit.
So no more, controlling neighborhoods, shaking down businesses.
Please. We're talking cybercrime, human trafficking, these sophisticated financial scams, money laundering across borders. It's a whole different ballgame.
Kind of scary to think about, honestly. So what can we learn from a case like this that feels so, old school?
The tactics change, but the core idea, it's the same. RHO, it still works. You hit them where it hurts, the money, disrupt their finances, and the whole structure crumbles.
Like cutting off the head of a snake.
More like a hydra, with all those heads. And it shows how important it is for law enforcement to work together, not just within a country, but globally. Organized crime, it doesn't respect borders.
Makes sense. But what about us regular folks? Anything we can do to protect ourselves?
Knowledge is power, right? Learn how these groups operate. Phishing scams, identity theft, even seemingly legit businesses could be fronts. Be skeptical, do your research, and if something seems off, report it.
Yeah, too good to be true and all that.
Exactly, and support laws and policies that fight organized crime. It's a constant battle, but we all got to do our part.
This has been amazing. We've gone from the courtroom to the inner workings of the mob to how it affects us today.
And it shows that no matter how much the world changes, the pursuit of justice, that's a constant. We need to be vigilant, adaptable, and ready to take on whatever these criminal enterprises throw at us.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of the Gambino family. Who knew legal documents could be so fascinating?
They tell a story, that's for sure. And sometimes those stories have more to teach us than we realize.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe out there.
All right, so today we are diving into some serious drama, the kind that has the music world buzzing.
Yeah.
Our source material. Jaguar writes, no-holds-barred interview on real-life productions. The one that's got everyone talking.
Talk about a deep dive, right?
Yes.
We're going beyond the headlines here.
Yeah.
You've given us quite the reading list, excerpts, analysis, the work. So let's unpack what makes this interview significant, even explosive, beyond just celebrity gossip.
Exactly, because this isn't just about who did what with whom.
Right.
It gets into power dynamics, industry secrets, and maybe even makes us question everything we thought we knew about some big names.
Absolutely. Now, for anyone who hasn't heard of her, Jaguar Wright isn't just some random commentator. This is a woman who's shared the stage with industry heavyweights like The Roots, Jay-Z. Her words carry weight.
Okay, so she's got credibility, but she also does not hold back.
No. She does not.
I mean, she goes after everyone. Diddy, Alicia Keys, Usher, even Will and Jada Pinkett Smith. It's a laundry list of accusations.
And this is where it gets interesting. One of the most explosive claims involves Diddy.
Oh, right.
Paints him as this almost Machiavellian figure, a puppet master pulling strings behind the scenes. She even implies he was somehow involved in Biggie Small's death and that Faith Evans was in on it.
Whoa, okay, that's huge. I mean, is there any actual evidence to back that up?
That's the thing. A lot of what she presents is based on her personal experiences and interpretations of events. Now, does that mean she's wrong? Not necessarily.
Okay.
But it does mean we need to listen with a critical ear and
Right.
consider the potential for bias.
Right, like with the accusations against Usher. She goes hard, suggesting he sabotaged Chris Brown's career out of jealousy and accusing him of predatory behavior.
And you see a pattern emerging here.
Okay.
This idea of powerful men using their influence in harmful ways. She even draws a parallel between Diddy and Russell Simmons, claiming Simmons made inappropriate comments about his own daughter.
Uh-huh.
Again, serious accusations.
Speaking of serious, she doesn't let Russell Simmons off the hook.
No.
She ties him to Bill Cosby, suggesting a larger pattern of powerful men exploiting others.
And this is where her commentary moves beyond just celebrity gossip.
Right.
She's talking about systemic issues, societal patterns.
Yeah.
It makes you think about the allegations against these figures in a different light.
Okay, but hold on. She also calls out Common Wright, accusing him of using and discarding women, mentioning Erykah Badu and Tiffany Haddish specifically.
And notice how she connects Common to Erykah Badu, someone she really goes after. Wright calls Badu the gatekeeper of the Dallas music scene, accusing her of exploiting young artists. She even throws in this wild story about Badu using a body double in a music video.
Wait, what? A
Yeah.
body double?
Yeah, it's a very specific detail, and it's characteristic of how Wright builds her narrative. She uses anecdotes like this to make her claims feel more grounded, even if they haven't been independently verified.
So she's a storyteller weaving a narrative about the dark side of the music industry.
Exactly, and it's a narrative that resonates with a lot of people, especially those who feel the industry is built on exploitation and hidden agendas.
But she doesn't just focus on individual artists, right? She also talks about 50 Cent and his business dealings, specifically in Shreveport, Louisiana.
Right, this is interesting because it shows her connecting the dots between personal behavior and larger societal issues. She accuses him of harming the environment and exploiting the community for profit. It's like she sees a pattern of exploitation everywhere.
It's interesting how she connects those dots.
Yeah.
Moving from personal accusations to allegations of environmental damage, like it's all part of the same system she's criticizing.
Exactly, and she doesn't just name names. She often gives very specific examples.
Right.
Like, remember that story she tells about Erykah Badu and the body double? That's a classic example.
Okay, so she's making some bold claims, but why? What's her motivation for putting all of this out there? I mean, this is career-risking stuff.
Right. We have to consider that. Is it a genuine desire for justice and accountability? A way to process her own experiences in the industry? A bid for attention? Or maybe a bit of all of those things?
Because it's not just those big names. She even takes aim at Alicia Keys, suggesting there's hypocrisy in Keys' public image versus her private life.
And that accusation about Alicia Keys actually ties into another big theme, right tackles.
Okay.
The idea of a gay agenda and how it's portrayed in media.
Okay, and this is where things get really complex.
Right.
Because on the one hand, she seems to be advocating for more authentic representation of Black love and relationships.
Right.
But on the other hand, some of her comments could be interpreted as homophobic.
Exactly. And it's important for us as listeners to recognize that tension
Yeah.
and to engage with it thoughtfully. It's okay to disagree with her, to challenge her perspective.
Yeah.
In fact, I think she'd be the first to encourage that kind of critical thinking.
Right, because her whole thing is about questioning everything, right?
Yes.
Don't just accept the narrative you're being fed, whether it's from the media, politicians, or even your favorite celebrity.
Exactly. Think for yourself, do your own research,
Right.
and don't be afraid to ask uncomfortable questions.
Which is exactly what she's doing in this interview.
Yes.
And she doesn't just point fingers outward, she also turns that critical gaze inward on the Black community itself.
Especially when it comes to what she calls victimhood culture.
Yes.
She seems to be cautioning against a culture where accusations are automatically accepted as fact without question or critical examination.
So it's like she's saying, yes, there are real issues of injustice and exploitation, but we also need to be mindful of how we frame those experiences and how we hold each other accountable.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between acknowledging harm and promoting personal responsibility.
Which, let's be honest, is a conversation that extends far beyond the music industry. It's relevant to all of us.
Absolutely. Because we're all part of shaping the culture, whether we realize it or not.
Right.
And the stories we tell ourselves, the narratives we buy into, have real-world consequences.
And one of the narratives that Wright seems particularly concerned about is the commodification of Black culture.
Yes, this idea that Black art, Black music, Black experiences are often packaged and sold back to us in a way that strips them of their power and authenticity.
And she sees this happening everywhere, from the music industry to Hollywood to the political arena.
Right, and she's not afraid to name names, calling out those she sees as complicit in this exploitation, regardless of their race or political affiliation.
Like when she goes after the Obamas, Kamala Harris, and Hillary Clinton,
Yeah.
she does not hold back.
No, she doesn't. And it's interesting because she's not just criticizing their policies.
Yeah.
She's questioning their motives, their authenticity.
It's like she's saying, don't be fooled by the image, by the carefully crafted persona, look deeper, question everything.
And that's a powerful message,
Yeah.
especially coming from someone who's been on the inside, who's seen how the game is played.
So we've got this web of accusations, this critique of the music industry, and then this broader social commentary about power, exploitation, and the stories we tell ourselves.
Right.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. And it's okay if it feels messy, if it doesn't fit neatly into a box, because life is messy and truth is often complex.
So where do we go from here? How do we make sense of all of this?
Well, I think it starts with asking ourselves some tough questions. How much of what Wright is saying resonates with us? Does it challenge our own assumptions about the entertainment industry, about celebrity culture, about society as a whole?
And maybe more importantly, what are we going to do with that discomfort? Are we going to brush it aside and move on to the next headline? Or are we going to sit with it, wrestle with it, and allow it to inform our own perspectives and choices?
Because ultimately that's what Jaguar Wright is asking of us.
Okay.
Not to blindly agree with her,
Yeah.
but to engage in the conversation, to think critically, and to demand better from ourselves and the world around us.
Okay, so we've got this web of accusations, some social commentary, and a whole lot to unpack. But before we go any further, let's take a moment to really understand the cultural context here.
Yeah.
What makes Jaguar Wright's voice, her perspective, particularly significant in this conversation?
That's key, because it goes beyond just the gossip. We need to understand why her words have the power to shake things up.
All right, let's get into it.
You know what makes Jaguar Wright's perspective so interesting is that she's coming from a place of experience.
Right.
She's seen firsthand the inner workings of the music industry,
Right.
the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
And that's why her words carry so much weight.
Okay.
Even when they're controversial, she's not afraid to challenge the status quo,
Yeah.
to call out hypocrisy where she sees it.
And she definitely sees hypocrisy when it comes to what she calls the gay agenda.
Right. And this is a tricky one because it's clearly something she feels strongly about, but it's also a topic that requires a lot of nuance and sensitivity.
Because on the one hand, she seems to be advocating for more authentic representation of Black love and relationships.
Right.
But on the other hand, some of her comments could be interpreted as homophobic.
Exactly. And it's important for us as listeners to recognize that tension and to engage with it thoughtfully.
Yeah.
It's okay to disagree with her, to challenge her perspective.
Yeah.
In fact, I think she'd be the first to encourage that kind of critical thinking.
Right, because her whole thing is about questioning everything, right?
Yes.
Don't just accept the narrative you're being fed.
Right.
Whether it's from the media, politicians, or even your favorite celebrities.
Exactly. Think for yourself, do your own research,
Right.
and don't be afraid to ask uncomfortable questions.
Which is exactly what she's doing in this interview.
Yes.
And she doesn't just point fingers outward, she also turns that critical gaze inward on the Black community itself.
Especially when it comes to what she calls victimhood culture.
Yes.
She seems to be cautioning against a culture where accusations are automatically accepted as fact without question or critical examination.
So it's like she's saying, yes, there are real issues of injustice and exploitation, but we also need to be mindful of how we frame those experiences and how we hold each other accountable.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between acknowledging harm and promoting personal responsibility.
Which, let's be honest, is a conversation that extends far beyond the music industry. It's relevant to all of us.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because we're all part of shaping the culture, whether we realize it or not. And the stories we tell ourselves, the narratives we buy into, have real-world consequences.
And one of the narratives that Wright seems particularly concerned about is the commodification of Black culture.
Yes, this idea that Black art, black music, black experiences are often packaged and sold back to us in a way that strips them of their power and authenticity.
And she sees this happening everywhere, from the music industry to Hollywood to the political arena.
Right, and she's not afraid to name names, calling out those she sees as complicit in this exploitation, regardless of their race or political affiliation.
Like when she goes after the Obamas, Kamala Harris, and Hillary Clinton,
Yeah.
she does not hold back.
No, she doesn't. And it's interesting because she's not just criticizing their policies, she's questioning their motives, their authenticity.
It's like she's saying, don't be fooled by the image, by the carefully crafted persona, look deeper, question everything.
And that's a powerful message, especially coming from someone who's been on the inside, who's seen how the game is played.
So we've got this web of accusations, this critique of the music industry, and then this broader social commentary about power exploitation and the stories we tell ourselves.
Right.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. And it's okay if it feels messy, if it doesn't fit neatly into a box, because life is messy and truth is often complex.
So where do we go from here? How do we make sense of all of this?
Well, I think it starts with asking ourselves some tough questions. How much of what Wright is saying resonates with us? Does it challenge our own assumptions about the entertainment industry, about celebrity culture, about society as a whole?
And maybe more importantly, what are we going to do with that discomfort? Are we going to brush it aside and move on to the next headline? Or are we going to sit with it, wrestle with it, and allow it to inform our own perspectives and choices?
Because ultimately that's what Jaguar Wright is asking of us.
Okay.
Not to blindly agree with her, but to engage in the conversation, to think critically, and to demand better from ourselves and the world around us.
So how do we apply that to our own lives? Because it's easy to get caught up in the drama of it all, but what are the real-world implications of what Wright is exposing?
That's a great question, and one that I think requires us to look beyond the headlines and really examine the systems at play.
Okay, so let's get into that, because this isn't just about a few bad apples in the music industry, right?
Absolutely not. This is about power dynamics that play out in all aspects of our lives, in our workplaces, our communities, even in our personal relationships.
So when Wright talks about the puppet master figures, the Diddy's of the world, it's not just about the music industry, is it?
Right. It's about recognizing those same power structures everywhere and understanding how they can be used to silence dissenting voices, to maintain the status quo, and to prevent real change from happening.
And it's about having the courage to speak up, even when it's risky, even when it's uncomfortable, just like Jaguar Wright is doing in this interview.
Exactly. Because silence only benefits those in power. It's up to us to amplify the voices of those who've been marginalized, to challenge the narratives that no longer serve us, and to demand better from the systems that shape our world.
Powerful stuff. And it makes you wonder, what kind of backlash might Jaguar Wright face for speaking out like this?
That's a valid concern, and one we should definitely address, because the music industry, like many industries, has a long history of silencing those who dare to challenge the status quo.
All right, let's talk about that. So we're talking about a potential backlash. What are the real-world consequences for someone like Jaguar Wright, who is essentially calling out some of the biggest names in the industry?
Well, she's definitely put herself out there, and history shows us that the music industry, like many powerful industries, doesn't always take kindly to whistleblowers.
Right. We've seen it time and time again. Artists get blacklisted, their careers stalled, all for speaking truth to power.
Yeah, it's a very real concern.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, her willingness to speak so openly might also inspire others to come forward with their own stories.
Right.
To hold these powerful figures accountable.
It's like she's saying, if I can do it, so can you. And that kind of collective action can be incredibly powerful.
Absolutely, because it's much harder to silence a chorus of voices than it is to silence a single voice.
And it's not just about speaking out against injustice. She's also challenging us to examine our own roles in these systems, like when she talks about the dangers of victimhood culture, for example.
Right, and that's a nuanced point that might get lost in all the other bombshells.
Yes.
She's not dismissing the experiences of those who have been harmed or exploited.
Right.
Instead, she's urging us to be mindful of how we frame those experiences and to avoid perpetuating a culture of blame without accountability.
It's about taking ownership of our own narratives, of not letting ourselves be defined solely by the ways in which we've been wronged.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that true empowerment comes from using our voices to create change, not just to assign blame.
Which brings us back to that central question, what do we do with all of this information, this mix of accusations, social commentary, and personal reflection?
Well, for starters, we don't have to have all the answers.
Okay.
In fact, I think it's more important to sit with the discomfort,
Yeah.
the questions that this interview raises.
Because it's easy to dismiss it all as just drama, right?
Celebrity gossip, nothing more.
Right. But I think there's a deeper message here. A call to action for all of us.
Okay.
And it starts with being more critical of the stories we're told,
Okay.
whether they're about the music industry, politics, or even our own lives.
So question everything, do your research, don't take anything at face value.
Exactly. And be wary of those who claim to have all the answers. Right.
Who present themselves as saviors or heroes, because the truth is usually far more complex and nuanced than that.
And maybe most importantly, be brave enough to speak your truth, even when it's scary, even when it feels like no one is listening.
Because you never know who might be listening, who might be
Right.
inspired by your courage to speak up.
Wow. So from celebrity gossip to a call to action, that's quite the deep dive.
It is, and it's a reminder that even the most seemingly frivolous topics can spark important conversations if we're willing to go beyond the surface and really engage with the complexities.
Exactly. Jaguar Wright might not have all the answers, but she's definitely asking the right questions.
Yeah.
And in a world that often feels designed to keep us distracted and divided, maybe that's the most radical act of all.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, on that note, we'll leave you to ponder all of this. Big thanks to you, our listeners, for joining us on this deep dive. It's been quite a ride. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep the conversation going.
Okay, so we've gotten some interesting stuff sent to us about
Yeah.
Jay-Z
Yeah.
and this supposed bunker.
Right.
This is like straight out of like a hip-hop thriller or something. We're talking about Jay-Z, like a secret bunker. I mean, come on.
It's a good one, right?
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
And all this stuff about Diddy and
Right.
legal trouble. So, I mean,
Where do you even want to begin?
I don't even know. I guess we should start with like what we were sent. We got these articles and reports, right?
Like from legit sources?
Yeah, I mean, these are all from pretty reputable places, and they all have this kind of similar thread about, Diddy maybe facing some really serious legal problems.
Uh-huh.
Like we're talking IOCO.
Yeah, Rico's no joke.
Yeah, that's not something to mess around with.
No, not at all. It's serious stuff.
Yeah, this isn't like a parking ticket or something.
No, definitely not.
So we've got that going on, and then there are all these like whispers
Oh. Whispers? Juice?
about Jay-Z, right?
Yeah.
Like freaking out.
Freaking out. Like in a good way or a bad way?
Well, I mean, wouldn't you be freaking out? I mean, if this whole thing with Diddy is true
Yeah.
and it could lead back to you.
I mean, I don't know how I'd react, honestly. It depends.
Yeah, of course, but
It depends how connected they really are,
yeah.
you know? Because if they're tight and Diddy's in hot water, that's not good.
Exactly.
But if it's old news, then maybe it's like, oh, okay, whatever.
Yeah, that's true. But that's the thing, like, from what I understand, they're not really that close these days.
Oh, really? Okay, so why is he so worried?
Exactly.
I mean, that's a good question. Why is he so worried then?
Yeah, so that's what we're going to try to figure out in this deep dive.
Okay.
Is this a genuine concern for a friend, or is it something more
Interesting.
self-preservation,
Okay, I'm hooked already.
And this is where the whole bunker thing comes in.
The bunker, yeah. So what's the deal with the, I mean, is that even real? Like, are we talking about a legit bunker?
So that's the thing, like, based on these articles, this isn't just some,
Right.
safe room with some extra water bottle.
Not just a panic room. Okay.
Yeah. We're talking like full-on military-grade security,
Yeah.
escape routes, surveillance.
Hold on. This is serious stuff.
Yeah.
Like, is that even legal? I mean, I know people have safe rooms and stuff, but a whole bunker.
That's a good question. I mean, I'm not a lawyer,
I don't know either.
but, when you're talking about that level of,
Yeah.
security and stuff, it makes you wonder.
It makes you wonder.
Like, where's the line? At what point does it become something else?
Right. Because it's one thing to want to be safe, but this is next level. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And it makes you think, like, what does he know that we don't?
Oh, now that's the question, right?
Yeah. I mean, is this about Diddy, or is there something bigger going on here?
Okay, so we've got Diddy maybe in trouble, Jay-Z maybe in hiding.
Yeah, basically.
This is wild.
And it gets even crazier.
It does. There's more.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, hit me.
So according to this one article,
Mhm.
Jay-Z went completely dark.
Dark. What do you mean dark? Like off social media dark?
No, like completely off the grid.
No way.
Yeah, like no Beyonce, no close friends, no nothing.
Wow, he really disappeared then.
It's like he just vanished.
That's intense.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
Mhm.
fun.
So what's he doing down there? In this bunker?
Well, that's what we have to figure out, right?
Right.
All right.
Let's do this.
That's the whole point of this deep dive.
I'm ready.
All right, so let's break it down.
Let's do it. I'm all ears.
So he's down there in this bunker.
Hmm.
What was he doing? Just like hanging out.
Yeah, like what's the bunker life like? Is he just chilling?
Right. Like, is he working on a new album or something?
Well, I doubt it's like a vacation, right?
True.
Yeah.
True.
I mean, if he's really worried about this whole Diddy thing, I bet he's got like a whole team of lawyers down there with him, right?
Probably figuring out all the angles.
Exactly. This is like serious legal strategizing, not just like writing rhymes.
Yeah, this is like high-stakes chess.
Exactly. He's probably got to be thinking 10 steps ahead of everyone else.
So he's like playing 3D chess while everyone else is playing checkers.
Right. And he's always been known for being super strategic, right? Like that's kind of his thing.
Yeah, he's always been a few steps ahead of the game.
Exactly. So while this whole thing might seem crazy, it's also kind of classic Jay-Z, you know?
True. True. But okay, so while he's underground, laying low, what's happening with Diddy? It's not looking good for him, right?
No, not really. I mean, if he's really facing a RICO investigation, that's a whole different ballgame.
Right. It's not just about Diddy anymore. It's about everyone and everything he's ever touched.
Exactly. We're talking about potential connections to organized crime, money laundering, all sorts of stuff.
And if those connections are real, it doesn't matter how famous or how rich you are, you're in trouble.
Right. This could be the end of an empire.
Okay, so let's say, hypothetically, Diddy goes down. What happens to Jay-Z?
That's the big question, isn't it? Because they were so close for so long,
Right, exactly.
it all comes down to what they can prove, right?
Yeah, like if there's no evidence connecting Jay-Z to any wrongdoing, he's probably in the clear, right?
Well, it's not always that simple. Remember, we're talking about RICO here. It's about patterns of behavior, associations.
So even if Jay-Z isn't directly involved in anything illegal, his past relationship with Diddy could still be a problem.
Exactly. They're going to be looking for any connection they can find.
Wow. So even if he wanted to, there's no way for Jay-Z to just erase his past with Diddy?
Nope. It's all about how he distances himself now. That's what his legal team is probably working on.
How do you even do that?
Yeah.
Just like issue a statement saying, I don't know that guy?
I mean, it's not that easy. They're going to be looking at everything. Financial records, phone calls, meetings, everything.
So maybe this whole bunker thing isn't just about paranoia. Maybe it's about creating distance.
Right, like a physical separation to go with the legal separation.
Wow. But still, I mean, can you imagine being so isolated, cut off from the world like that?
I know, it's kind of a lonely thought, isn't it?
Yeah. And speaking of lonely, our sources say Jay-Z has an escape plan ready to go if things get really bad.
An escape plan? Like, what are we talking about here?
Like passports, fake identities, the whole 9 yards.
Whoa, hold on. So if things hit the fan, he's just going to disappear?
That's what it sounds like. He's got a whole other life waiting for him somewhere, supposedly.
Wow. That's next level.
Yeah, it's like something out of a movie.
So is this really about Diddy, or is Jay-Z preparing for something even bigger?
That's a great question. Maybe we'll find out in the next part of our deep dive. So he's just like got his eject button ready to go.
Right, like a whole other life just waiting.
I know. It's kind of wild, right?
It makes you think, like, what does he know?
Exactly.
What are we missing here?
Yeah, like, is he being paranoid or is he just, like, super prepared?
That's the thing, right? It's like, where do you draw the line between being cautious and being, you know, like a little too extra?
Right, right. Because on the one hand, it's like, okay, the guy's got enemies. He's got money. He wants to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, it's like, wow, this is a whole other level.
It's intense, right? It makes you think about, like, what it means to have that much to lose.
Yeah, like when you're that rich and famous, does the world just start to look different? Like, is everyone out to get you?
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, right? Especially in the music industry.
True, true.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's not paranoia. Maybe it's just like reality.
Right. Like maybe this is just what it takes to survive at that level.
Okay, so let's say, for argument's sake, that this is all true. Jay-Z's in a bunker. He's got an escape plan, the whole 9 yards. What does that say about him?
Well, on the one hand, it says he's a survivor, right? He's
Right.
not just going to sit around and wait for things to happen to him.
Right.
He's going to take control, make his own moves.
Yeah, he's definitely not afraid to make a bold move.
Exactly. But on the other hand, you have to wonder about the cost, you know?
The cost. What do you mean?
Well, like, what does it do to a person to live like that? Always looking over your shoulder, always planning for the worst case scenario.
That's true. It sounds kind of exhausting, honestly.
Right. And lonely.
Yeah, definitely lonely. So I guess the big question is it worth it?
I don't know. That's a tough one. I mean, I guess that's something only Jay-Z can answer.
Yeah, that's true. But it's definitely something to think about. And it's a good reminder that we never really know what's going on behind closed doors, even with someone as famous as Jay-Z.
Exactly. We see the headlines, we hear the rumors, but we never really know the whole story.
Well, that's what we try to do here on The Deep Dive. Uncover those hidden stories. Get to the bottom of things.
It's like putting together a puzzle, right?
Yeah.
With all of these little pieces of information.
And sometimes the picture isn't always clear. But that's okay. That's what makes it interesting.
Right. It's the mystery that keeps us coming back for more.
Exactly. So to all of you listening out there, keep those theories coming. Keep digging for those clues because you never know what you might find. And who knows, maybe one day we'll finally get to the bottom of this whole Jay-Z bunker mystery.
Until then, we can only speculate.
That's right. This is, draws out the word this, The Deep Dive, signing off for now, but the conversation never ends. See you next time.
All right, so buckle up because today we are really diving deep into Cat Williams's world. We're talking about his recent interview on Club Shay. And let me tell you, this was not your average celebrity puff piece. He went there, calling out some major names in comedy. Steve Harvey, Cedric the Entertainer, Ricky Smiley. He did not hold back.
Like Williams came on this show with a purpose. It wasn't just to chat or promote anything. Yeah. It's like he's on a mission to expose what he sees as this like lack of integrity in comedy, especially from guys that he considers successful but not necessarily deserving.
Yeah, and the way he tells it, it's not just like hearsay or whatever. He's got the receipts. Like he even claims to have a photographic memory, which adds a whole other layer to this.
Oh, wow.
So right out of the gate, he comes out swinging with this accusation of joke theft against Cedric the Entertainer.
And it's not just any joke either. This is like the heart of Williams' act. His the joke he ends his set with, the one he really meticulously crafted. He even talks about working with another comedian, Mark Curry, to punch it up, which in comedy terms means like making it funnier, sharper.
So we're talking about like a seriously honed piece of material here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so picture this. Williams performs this carefully crafted joke at the Comedy Store. Cedric is in the audience, even compliments him on it. Fast forward 2 years, it's Cedric's closing joke in Kings of Comedy.
Oh, wow.
I mean, talk about...
Yeah, you can practically hear the frustration in Williams' voice when he describes this whole thing. And I think it goes beyond just the joke itself. It's about the work ethic, the originality. This is something that I think is at the core of Williams' frustration. He sees a younger generation of comedians taking shortcuts, writing coattails instead of putting in the hours.
Yeah, you definitely see this contrast, right? Like Williams with all of his, antics. He's clearly passionate about stand-up. Like he talks about the effort, the dedication, almost like a badge of honor.
Right, and to him, that work ethic is inseparable from originality, from being true to yourself as a comedian. So to see these jokes, he considers his own being borrowed. It feels like a betrayal of that, which, it makes his anger a little more understandable.
It's interesting, though. It kind of begs the question, how much of this is Williams' personal experience versus a broader issue in the comedy world? Like, are we talking common practice here or a personal vendetta? It's a lot to unpack.
Definitely. And it's a question that goes beyond comedy, too. Like, how much originality can we really expect in any field? Where do you draw the line between inspiration and just straight up stealing? Is it different in a super competitive industry like entertainment?
Yeah, it's a lot to think about. And speaking of which, Williams doesn't just stop at Cedric. He then sets his sights on Ricky Smiley, specifically about the movie Friday After Next. So we've got this whole Friday After Next situation where Williams is saying he was supposed to have a much bigger role, specifically as Money Mike, the character that Ricky Smiley ended up playing.
Right, and this is where, like, Williams' whole thing about his photographic memory, it really comes into play. Like, he goes into so much detail, picking apart these inconsistencies in Smiley's version of events. He even, like, describes how he came up with the entire Money Mike persona, the look, the lines, everything.
Yeah, he even drops this bombshell about fighting to change the script, to remove a scene where Money Mike gets raped. He was, like, adamant that rape is never funny.
Wow.
Which, considering some of his more out there material, it's a surprisingly profound statement.
It is. It's like this weird contradiction. It suggests that he has this like really strong moral compass, like a line that even he won't cross. And it makes you wonder where that comes from. Like, where does this unwavering sense of self originate?
Well, he does talk about his childhood a bit. And let's just say unconventional is putting it mildly. Growing up with parents who were Jehovah's Witnesses, teaching himself by reading the encyclopedia cover to cover, I mean, that's a pretty unique foundation.
That's wild. It makes you wonder if that's part of what shaped his comedic voice, you know? Like that early exposure to so much information.
Yeah.
Trying to make sense of it all. I feel like that's something a lot of us learners can relate to.
Totally. That feeling of like, you know a lot about a lot of things,
Yeah.
but you're still searching for those like deeper truths.
Yeah.
And speaking of searching, his path to stand-up comedy was anything but direct.
Oh, yeah. Talk about a winding road.
Yeah.
Selling products door to door.
Yeah.
Working with, he puts it ladies of the night. I mean,
Okay.
those experiences must have given him some stories and a pretty unique perspective on life.
For sure.
He even talks about a period of homelessness,
Yeah.
which he credits with, like, giving him this real understanding of hardship and the dangers of drugs.
It definitely adds another layer to understanding his intensity, his drive. This wasn't just some hobby he picked up in college or whatever. Comedy was an escape, like a way to claw his way out of a tough situation.
Absolutely. And that takes us right back to his work ethic.
Yeah.
This idea that success is earned, not given. It's like those early struggles fueled his fire.
Yeah.
This determination to make it on his own terms, to never compromise his vision.
Which, I mean, when you really think about it, it makes his anger toward guys like Steve Harvey and Cedric the Entertainer, it makes a little more sense.
Yeah.
It's not just about jokes, it's about respect.
Totally.
Like he sees them as not respecting the grind,
right.
the years of hard work it takes to actually make it in comedy.
It's like he's saying, look, you haven't earned it if you're taking shortcuts.
Exactly.
It's a very specific definition of making it.
Yeah.
One that values authenticity and originality above all else.
Yeah.
And that brings us to, I think, another really fascinating aspect of Cat Williams.
Yeah.
This, like, unwavering commitment to staying true to himself.
And he's got some stories about that for sure. Like turning down a role in Big Mama's House too because he refused to wear a dress.
Oh, wow.
I mean, talk about putting your money where your mouth is.
Right.
Turning down a Tyler Perry movie.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, it shows you like he's serious about protecting his comedic style. Some things are just non-negotiable, even if it means walking away from a huge opportunity and this commitment to his values. It goes beyond just his stand-up too. He talks a lot about his financial generosity.
Oh, yeah.
Supporting other artists. Giving back to the communities he visits.
It's like he's trying to use his success to uplift others.
Totally.
Like, I did it my way, and I'm going to help you do the same.
Exactly.
It's really refreshing to hear, honestly, especially in an industry that could be so cutthroat.
For sure.
He even talks about this idea of paying it forward, like it's some kind of karmic balancing act, which is an interesting way to look at it.
It is. It shows a different side of him, like this generosity that you might not expect from his onstage persona.
Right.
And let's not forget, for all his talk about working with ladies of the night, Williams is a family man.
Yeah, he is.
He's a father, and he clearly prioritizes his kids.
Definitely. He even talks about how important women are in his life, personally and professionally.
Absolutely.
Like he sees women as this source of strength and support, which is really cool to hear.
So when we look back at everything we've talked about, the honesty, the dedication to his craft, this like unwavering commitment to his values, it makes you think, can you really reach that level of success without compromising who you are?
It's the question, isn't it?
It really is.
Cat Williams seems to be saying yes, but it comes at a price. And maybe that's the thing for our listeners to really consider. What price are you willing to pay for authenticity?
That's deep.
Are you willing to fight for your vision? Even if it means turning down opportunities or ruffling some feathers along the way.
Man. It's definitely something to think about. Cat Williams may be a comedian, but his story is anything but a joke. It's real. It's raw.
Yeah.
And it really makes you think about what it means to be successful and stay true to yourself in a world that's constantly trying to change you.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
You know, all those data breaches and privacy things we hear about these days?
Yeah.
Well, this deep dive takes those anxieties, those concerns, and throws them right into the legal ring.
Oh, wow.
You send us a court document,
Okay.
a federal judge's dismissal in a case.
Okay.
It's Stoya LaRose against Sean Diddy Combs.
Wow. So on the surface, it sounds like a celebrity gossip column.
Yeah.
But when you look deeper, there are some really complex questions about what we consider stealing in the digital world.
Right.
How do you prove it?
Exactly.
And whether the law even knows how to handle these kinds of cases.
So LaRose's main argument is that Diddy through his companies,
Yeah.
stole stuff from her phone, from
Yeah.
her conversations.
Yeah.
We're talking images,
Yeah.
ideas,
Okay.
personal details,
Hmm.
and used them
Interesting.
for his own business ventures.
Yeah.
Profit, basically.
Uh-huh.
She uses words like hacking and stalking
You gave me that.
to get attention.
Yeah, that'll get your attention for sure.
Yeah, but ultimately,
Yeah.
the judge dismisses her complaint.
So what's important to understand here is that she's trying to claim intellectual property theft.
Right.
She specifically cites the Defend Trade Secrets Act and the Lanham Act. That's the one for trademarks.
Yeah.
But as the judge points out,
Mm-hmm.
her complaint doesn't have the evidence it needs to make those claims actually stick.
It's not enough to just say, hey, somebody stole my awesome idea.
Oh, no.
You got to connect the dots.
Right. And
In a way that satisfies the court.
you need proof.
Yeah.
You can't
yeah.
just make
See here,
accusations.
take the trade secrets claim, for example.
Okay.
Imagine you have like a top secret recipe
Okay.
for the world's best cookies.
All right. I'm listening.
To prove that someone stole that recipe, you can't just be like, my cookie recipe is gone.
Exactly.
You have to show that the recipe was a valuable secret.
So maybe you only shared it with a few people
Right.
under strict confidentiality agreement.
It's like super secret.
Mhm.
You have to show that you took steps to protect that recipe.
So you kept it in a safe, or
Yeah.
you used encryption software or something like that.
Exactly.
Some kind of special protection.
Yeah.
And third,
Yeah.
you have to prove that the defendant,
Mm-hmm.
the alleged cookie thief,
Right.
took that recipe and used it to their advantage.
Yeah.
Like they opened a bakery
Their own bakery.
with your exact cookies.
Stole your cookies.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense in that context.
Yeah.
But how do we apply that to the digital world? It
Oh,
seems
right.
a lot harder to prove that someone stole an idea from your phone,
It is.
especially when ideas can be so intangible,
That's the hard part.
right?
Think about it.
Yeah,
We leave digital fingerprints everywhere.
we do.
Text messages,
Emails,
emails,
social media,
social media,
yeah,
location data.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Proving that someone specifically went in and stole an idea
Yeah.
or a piece of intellectual property
Right.
from all that data, it's a lot.
It's like finding a grain of sand on the beach.
That is a great analogy.
I like that one.
It really is.
Yeah.
So even if LaRose can show that her phone was hacked,
Right.
that her accounts were accessed,
Even if she can prove that.
yeah, she still has to connect that to specific business decisions
Exactly.
made by Diddy or his companies.
Let's say LaRose texted a friend about a new fashion line that she was working on.
Yeah.
And then Diddy comes out with a similar line a few months later.
Right.
It's not enough to say, see, he stole my idea.
Point to the text.
Yeah.
Right.
She would need to prove a link between that text
Yeah.
and the development of his fashion line.
Like a smoking gun, kind of.
Like maybe someone at his company had access to those messages.
Right.
Or there are documents that show they were inspired by her.
Mm-hmm.
But without that proof, it's just speculation.
So she's essentially got to build a digital trail,
Yes,
a breadcrumb path,
that's a good way to put it.
from her phone to Diddy's businesses. And that's where it gets complicated, right?
Very complicated.
Especially when you're going up against someone
Especially
with tons of resources.
and lawyers.
And lawyers. Yeah.
Lots of lawyers.
But the judge isn't completely shutting her down.
No.
I thought her case was dismissed.
Well, it was.
Yeah.
But there's a twist.
Oh.
The judge gives LaRose 30 days to replead,
To try again.
to come back with a more detailed complaint. It's like the judge is saying,
Chance.
I see potential here,
Okay.
but you need to do your homework and show me the receipts.
So it's not case closed. It's more like intermission.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's what makes this so fascinating.
Yeah.
We get to watch the legal process in real time.
Front row seat.
LaRose gets another try.
Yeah.
We get to see if she can connect those dots and build a stronger case.
But even beyond the legal stuff, it
Mm.
makes you think bigger picture.
Wow.
We're all so tied to our phones, our digital device.
is.
If someone like LaRose,
Mhm.
who, let's be honest,
Yeah.
isn't your average person
Well,
is
yeah.
having trouble proving this,
Yeah.
what hope do the rest of us have?
Yeah.
It's kind of
A
unsettling.
little unsettling for sure.
Yeah. Feels like we're living in some kind of wild west of data,
Oh, yeah.
where the rules are still being written,
Definitely.
and anyone with a little tech know-how can just come in and
Mhm.
rustle up some digital cattle.
That's a great image.
Right.
And not that far off.
Yeah.
The law is always trying to catch up
Always.
to technology.
Right.
And this case is a perfect example of that.
Yeah. So even if it feels like the
Mhm.
average person is kind of
Yeah.
up a creek without a paddle,
Yeah.
what can we do to protect ourselves?
Right. So practical tips
Yeah, what can people listening do?
to safeguard their digital life
Yeah.
and avoid ending up like LaRose. Strong passwords are number one.
Okay.
I mean password 123.
Right.
Think long, complex, and different for every single account.
Okay.
You could even use a password manager to keep track.
Oh, yeah. Those are super helpful.
Very helpful.
And two-factor authentication,
Yes, wherever you can.
wherever possible, right?
It might seem like a pain,
Yeah.
but it's worth it.
It's a little extra security.
Big difference, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And be careful about what you share.
Oh, that's a good point.
Like, do you really need to post a picture of your passport
Right.
or brag about your business idea
On social media.
on social media?
Right. Yeah, a little discretion goes a long way.
Sometimes a lot of discretion goes a long way.
Speaking of social media,
Yeah.
let's go back to Diddy for a minute.
Okay.
Even if LaRose doesn't win in court,
Right.
just being accused of this could really damage his reputation.
Oh, for sure.
Especially online.
Especially in the court of public opinion.
Right.
We live in a world where accusations spread like wildfire.
So fast.
Instantly.
Yeah, even if Diddy is totally innocent, the
Right.
fact that it's out there,
The stain remains.
it could stick around for years.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what's that saying?
Mm.
Whisper can travel around the world before the truth can get its boots on.
Exactly. And here,
Right.
those whispers are even louder because
Mhm.
he's a celebrity with a huge following.
So even if LaRose's case goes nowhere, the public might already have decided.
The court of public opinion can be brutal.
So what are we supposed to do?
Yeah.
Delete our social media?
No, I wouldn't go that far.
Go off the grid?
I mean, it's about finding a balance.
Okay.
Know the risks.
Mm-hmm.
Take steps to protect yourself.
Yeah.
And maybe think twice before you share that next juicy piece of gossip.
But let's say someone listening
Mm.
really thinks their intellectual property was stolen.
Oh, wait.
What should they do?
Okay.
Where do they start?
First things first, write everything down.
Document everything.
Emails, texts, posts, anything that helps your case.
Gather the evidence.
Right. And if you have a trademark or a patent,
Okay.
make sure all that paperwork is organized.
Got it.
Then talk to a lawyer who specializes in intellectual property.
Because this is serious stuff.
Very serious.
You don't want to do this yourself.
Not alone. No.
No.
It's a really complex area of law.
Yeah.
You need an expert on your side.
To help you navigate.
Exactly.
But even with a good lawyer,
Yeah,
there's no guarantee you'll win.
that's true. Especially if you're up against,
Someone with deep pockets?
right, and a whole team of lawyers.
Yeah.
But the legal system is supposed to be fair.
Level playing field.
Anyone can get justice.
Okay.
And sometimes just filing a lawsuit
Yeah.
can force people to be accountable.
Regardless of the outcome.
Exactly.
So it's not always about winning or losing.
No, it's about standing up for what's right.
Even when it's hard.
Exactly. And that brings us back to LaRose,
Okay.
whether she wins or loses.
Yeah.
Her case reminds us that the law is always changing.
Trying to keep up with technology.
We need to protect ourselves
Yeah.
and our ideas.
In this digital age.
It's like we're all pioneers.
Yeah, out on the digital frontier.
Yeah. And we're still figuring out the rules.
Right, so many unknowns.
And like any frontier,
Yeah.
there are risks and rewards.
So for our listener who sent in this court document, we hope this deep dive
Yeah.
has helped you understand
Helped you see
intellectual property law in the digital world.
a little bit better.
But beyond the legal stuff,
Yeah.
we hope it makes you think about how you protect yourself,
Absolutely.
your digital life,
Be smart.
what it means to fight for your rights.
In a world where data is king.
Yeah, like data is the new gold rush.
Absolutely.
This case really shows how different the law and the digital world are.
Totally. The law is like this old giant
Yeah.
struggling to keep up with this fast-moving digital world.
Right, and it's up to us to
Yeah.
figure out how to protect ourselves.
Exactly. Be proactive.
But that can feel impossible sometimes, especially when you're up against someone like Diddy
oh, yeah.
with all his resources.
A whole team of lawyers.
Yeah,
It's true. But don't forget about the power of public opinion.
right.
Even if LaRose doesn't win in court,
Yeah,
she's already shined a light on these issues,
have people talking.
and that can lead to change.
So even if she can't change the system herself, she's forcing people to look at it.
Exactly. It's like holding a magnifying glass up to the whole thing.
Right, and that could make others come forward,
Definitely.
demand more transparency
Push for more protection.
for creators.
For innovators.
Yeah, she's kind of a trailblazer.
I like that.
right? Carving a path for others to follow.
Even if it's a little rough around the edges.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this case plays out.
Oh, yeah. What happens next?
What arguments work in court,
Hmm.
how it changes the conversation about intellectual property in the digital world.
It's a real-time case study.
Exactly. And it reminds us that the law is always changing.
Always evolving.
And cases like this one can change the boundaries of the law,
Absolutely.
make us rethink what it means to own an idea.
In a world where everything is shared and remixed all the time.
It makes you think about the future of creativity.
Doesn't it?
Like, how do we protect originality
How do we protect new ideas
in a digital world?
where everything is about borrowing and building on what came before?
That's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
It's not just for the courts to decide.
No, it's something we all need to think about.
So for our listener who sent us this case, who wants to know what it all means,
Yeah.
I think the big takeaway is that this case,
Even though it's just starting, shows us the big issues we're facing.
technology, people speaking up,
Demanding change.
we're all part of this changing digital world.
And we need to be aware
Be proactive
and challenge the status quo.
when things aren't right.
I love these deep dives.
Me too.
It's not just about learning stuff.
Yeah. It's about using what you learn
To engage with the world.
to make things better.
So to our listener,
Keep exploring.
keep asking questions
Keep diving deep.
because critical thinking,
Making connections
that's what matters.
in a world full of information.
That's what matters most.
Until next time.
Ever get the feeling that some stories, well, they're just accidents waiting to happen?
Mhm.
That's kind of the vibe I'm getting from this New Jersey case, you know. State of New Jersey versus Charlie Wingate and Kelvin Leerdam. The court documents here.
Oh, this is going to be good.
Yeah, get ready, Ray. Jealousy, robbery, a man's life cut short, this whole thing.
Yeah, you always wonder, like, what's that tipping point?
Exactly.
Where did it all go wrong? And this case, I think, really highlights how easily things can spiral, you know, just from like a simple act of, well, showing off, I guess.
Okay, so we're talking about Alan Plowden.
Right.
He's a guy who, let's just say, enjoyed the finer things in life.
Yeah.
Right. And it's his interactions with Gina Conway. She's an exotic dancer. And, well, that's where everything kind of kicks off.
That's our catalyst.
Right. So Plowden's, you know, flashing cash, taking Conway shopping.
I see.
He even, like, shows off this Louis Vuitton bag. And it's not just any bag. It is stuffed with thousands of dollars. Thousands.
Not exactly low-key.
Talk about a tempting target. Like, come on, man.
Yeah, not the best idea. But you got to see it from Conway's side, too, right? She's dating this guy, Charlie Wingate, and whether she meant to or not, she spills the beans. She tells him about Plowden's money.
Oh, so she's...
Dangled the carrot.
And Wingate's, what, feeling a little,
Jealous.
Oh, yeah. Big time. And, well, that's where things go dark. We've got the jealousy. We've got the promise of easy money. Yeah. Wingate decides he's going to take what he thinks Plowden owes him somehow.
But he's not going to do it himself, right?
Right. Exactly. And that brings us to Kelvin Leerdam. Now, the documents are a little fuzzy on this point, but he's either Wingate's brother or stepbrother.
Either way, family affair, never a good sign.
Right. So Leerdam, he becomes the muscle. Wingate basically hires him to do the robbery. And, of course, they need a guide to find Plowden. Who else? Conway?
And this is where the story gets even more complicated. Because Conway, she claims the original plan, what they were going to do, it was different.
How so?
She says they were only supposed to take the money while Plowden was out.
Okay.
Like a clean, you know, non-violent thing. But things don't go quite that way, do they?
Because Leerdam shows up to the hotel room with a gun.
Yeah.
Gloves, duct tape. Not exactly your everyday essentials.
No, that's not someone popping in for tea. That, to me, screams premeditation. This wasn't some spur of the moment, oh, let's just grab some cash. This was thought out.
And that detail, that premeditation, the prosecution, they're going to use that a lot.
See, and this is where things get really messy. Because it wasn't just Plowden in that hotel room.
Oh, no.
David Taylor was there, too. Plowden's business partner. Wrong place, wrong time.
And that's when everything goes sideways. A struggle, Taylor tries to get involved, and Leerdam, he fires the gun.
Tragic, senseless. Like you said, greed and violence, they're frequent companions.
And just like that, a man is dead. Planned robbery turned fatal. So then what? We're in court now.
We're in court. And the trial, it really gives us this, well, I guess you'd call it a front row seat to how complicated it is to actually figure out the truth. Witness testimonies, they're all over the place. Everyone's got their own version of that night.
Right, like a puzzle with pieces missing.
Yeah.
So Conway, she ends up as the prosecution's star witness, right?
She does. Remember those charges against her? Well, she makes a deal, tells them everything, all the ins and outs of the plan in exchange for a lighter sentence.
Risky.
Very. But her testimony, it's key. It paints Wingate as the guy who set the whole thing in motion, the mastermind.
Okay, so we've got Conway.
Hmm.
What about Giselle Neves? She's the other woman who was there during the robbery, right?
That's right. And her testimony, it lines up with the prosecution's case, too. She IDs Leardam both in court and from a photo array they showed her earlier.
Solid evidence.
And there's more. She remembers a scar on Leardam's face. A very distinct scar.
Wow. So that pretty much puts Leardam at the scene.
Right there with them.
What about Plowden? What does he have to say?
Plowden. That's where it gets interesting. See, he couldn't identify Leardam. Not in the photos. In fact, he actually pointed to the wrong guy at first.
No way. Talk about unreliable narrator.
It happens. Eyewitness accounts, they can be shaky. Trauma, stress, time, it all warps your memory. But here's the thing. Even though he couldn't ID Leardam, his account of the robbery itself, that's valuable.
As context.
Exactly. Even if it wasn't perfect, it's another piece of the puzzle. Speaking of which, we can't forget about the taxi driver.
Oh, right. Mohammed Dumabengi. He was the one who drove Leardam and Conway that night. Didn't even know what he was getting into.
Unwitting accomplice. But his testimony, as mundane as it seems, it's actually pretty important. Places Leardam and Conway at the scene. And get this, he remembers Leardam changing clothes after they left the hotel.
Interesting.
Why change clothes after a supposedly innocent visit? Makes you think.
Definitely suspicious.
Yeah.
But I guess the real nail in the coffin, so to speak, is the cell phone records, right?
Always. They're like a digital trail of breadcrumbs. And in this case, those breadcrumbs, well, they led straight back to the crime. They confirmed everything Conway had said about the communication between them.
Putting Wingate right at the center of it all.
Yep. Planning, coordinating, the whole 9 yards.
It's like they say, right? The devil's in the details. And man, in this case,
These details tell quite the story.
a story of the prosecution. They used to build their case. You've got the eyewitness accounts, you've got those cell phone records, all pointing back to Wingate and Leardam.
Don't forget about that premeditation. The prosecution hammered that point home. Remember those gloves, that duct tape? Leardam went there prepared. That's not an accident, that's intent. And it seems the jury, they saw it too.
Because it's guilty, guilty, guilty all the way down.
For both of them, Wingate, Leardam, guilty on all counts.
Yeah.
Robbery, kidnapping.
And aggravated manslaughter.
Oh.
Which I'm still wrapping my head around. Like, that's a step down from murder, right?
It is. And I think that distinction, that's the court acknowledging the roles each of them played.
So Wingate, he's the planner, the organizer, but he wasn't actually there when Taylor was killed.
Right. And you see that reflected in the sentencing, too. Wingate gets 40 years.
40 years. That's a long time. But Leardam.
Life sentence. He pulled the trigger, and that, unfortunately, carries the heaviest weight.
It's a harsh reminder, isn't it? That even if you're not the one who commits the act itself, being a part of something like this, it has consequences.
Yeah.
Huge consequences.
Absolutely. This whole case, it's a testament to the fact that, well, actions have reactions. It's like a ripple effect, you know? One bad decision, one moment of envy, the desire for easy money. It can all unravel so quickly, and the fallout, it impacts everyone, not just the victim, but the families, the friends. It's a web of pain.
And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What if things had gone differently? What if Conway had never mentioned Plowden's money? What if Leardam had left the gun at home?
It's impossible to say for sure, but it highlights something crucial. Every choice, even the ones that seem small, they matter. They can have consequences we never could have imagined.
Like a butterfly flapping its wings.
And causing a hurricane on the other side of the world. It's chaos theory in action. In this case, with all its twists and turns, the jealousy, the violence, the tragic loss of life, it forces us to confront that, to really think about our choices, the weight they carry, and the lasting impact they have, not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us.
It's a heavy thought to end on, but an important one. So to everyone listening, thank you for joining us for this deep dive. It's been, well, intense.
To say the least.
But these stories, they need to be told. They remind us that truth is complex, justice isn't always black and white, and that sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the darkest corners of the human experience. Until next time, everyone, stay curious, but stay safe.
All right, everyone, get ready, because today we are diving into a case, and this one is a doozy.
Oh, yeah, this one's got it all.
Kidnapping, robbery, murder. We've got constitutional law coming at us from every angle.
It's a wild ride, that's for sure.
So to set the stage, we're looking at a U.S. District Court opinion.
Right, and it's denying this petition for a writ of habeas corpus.
Which is basically a last-ditch appeal.
Last-ditch effort, yeah.
Yeah.
Kelvin Leerdam is the petitioner, and he is saying his constitutional rights were violated. And we're going to unpack all 6 claims.
6 claims.
6 claims.
Okay, so clearly he feels like he got a pretty raw deal.
He's certainly making that case, yeah.
Before we get into all the legal arguments, though, I think it's helpful to set the scene. We're talking about a 2006 incident. Takes place at a Holiday Inn.
Sounds kind of normal so far.
Yeah. Not your typical Holiday Inn stay, though.
Not even close.
This happened in Fort Lee, New Jersey, and it ended with 2 men kidnapped and robbed. And tragically, one of the men, loses his life.
Yeah, so we're not talking petty theft here. The victims, Alan Plowden and David Taylor, they were known to have money.
Oh, so they were targets.
They like to flash it around a little bit, you know?
Okay.
And it seems like that's what painted a target on their backs, unfortunately.
Yeah, that'll do it. And this is where things get interesting, I think, right? This is where Gina Conway enters the picture. She's an exotic dancer.
Right.
She's entangled with Plowden.
Right.
And also with Charlie Wingate, who, depending on what you read, is either her brother or her stepbrother.
It's a little murky. Yeah, their relationship, not totally clear there, but either way, she spills the tea to Wingate about Plowden's wealth.
Ah, okay.
Oh.
So she's the link.
She's the connection.
Okay.
Yep.
And so they hatch this plan.
And it's not exactly Ocean's 11, you know, it's not a smooth operation.
Things get a little messy.
From what we can piece together in the court documents, this whole thing at the Holiday Inn it spiraled really quickly from a robbery into just this chaotic, violent encounter.
And that's when David Taylor is killed.
Right.
Man. Okay, so this is heavy stuff from the get-go. So then we end up with Kelvin Leerdam and Charlie Wingate. They're kind of our main players, right?
Yeah, they emerge as the key players. And they're both hit with a slew of charges related to this incident. Everything from kidnapping to robbery.
Oh, yeah, they're not messing around.
No, this is the real deal. And get this. They're tried together.
Together.
Joint trial.
Oh, man. I bet that complicates things.
You can say that again. Adds a whole other layer to this whole thing.
I'm sure that'll come back to haunt us, or at least be something to unpack as we go here. So, fast forward a bit. They're both found guilty. Leerdam gets a life sentence. But he's been fighting this, right? This is not his first appeal.
Oh, no, he has been busy. Direct appeal, then a post-conviction relief petition. Both denied. So this habeas corpus petition that we're about to dive into, this is it. This is his last shot.
High stakes.
High stakes.
You're telling me. Okay, so let's get into it. Those 6 claims, each one is like a different way that Leerdam's saying, hey, the system failed me.
And these aren't small potatoes. These are like fundamental rights. We're talking about the foundation of how our justice system works.
Exactly. Huge. So where do we even begin?
Well, we can start with claim 1. And this one really hinges on Giselle Neves. Remember her?
She's in the hotel room, right?
Right, with Plowden. So Leerdam is saying that the prosecution, they made a deal with Neves to get her to testify.
Yeah.
But they didn't disclose it. They basically let her lie on the stand.
Ooh, like a legal bait and switch?
That's Leerdam's argument. So follow me here. Neves was initially charged with conspiracy to commit robbery. Pretty serious stuff. But those charges were dropped. After she finished this pre-trial intervention program, it's called PTI.
PTI.
Right? And as a condition of that program, she agreed to cooperate with the prosecution. Testifying against Leerdam and Wingate, that was part of the deal.
But she didn't exactly volunteer that information on the stand.
Nope. During the trial, Neves is up there, under oath, and she says there is no deal requiring her to testify against them. But, and this is where it gets juicy, remember I mentioned that PTI transcript?
Mm-hmm.
That's where the discrepancy pops up. It clearly outlines the terms of her agreement. And cooperation. Mandatory.
Busted. So Leerdam's lawyer, he just like stumbles upon this transcript.
It wasn't quite that dramatic,
Yeah.
but yeah, that PTI transcript throws a wrench in things.
Mhm.
The prosecution, when they're confronted with this, they're basically like, well, we were trying to get truthful testimony. She wasn't bound by any deal at the time that she was on the stand.
But come on, she got into the program because she agreed to cooperate.
Right. Hard to argue with that logic. Learjam's lawyer was not happy, as you can imagine.
I did not.
So the prosecution, to their credit, they do offer to have her recalled. So Leardam's lawyer could cross-examine her about this whole PTI thing. But what ended up happening is they just read a stipulation to the jury, basically summarizing the terms of her agreement.
Okay, so at least the jury knew, even if it was kind of after the fact. Did it matter? What did the court say?
The court acknowledged, yes, the state, they have a duty to disclose evidence that could be favorable to the defendant, especially if it calls into question a witness's credibility. But because Leardam's attorney had the opportunity to use this information during the trial,
Okay.
and because there was other evidence pointing to Leardam's guilt, the court's like, this late disclosure, it's not enough to overturn the conviction.
Still, though, shady.
Yeah. Doesn't exactly inspire confidence, does it?
Not really. All right, claim 2. This one's all about eyewitness testimony, right? Always a slippery slope.
Oh, yeah, this is a big one. So buckle up, because this is where the case really hinges on two people. Plowden, who survived the ordeal, and Mbenga, the taxi driver.
Right, right.
Leardam's arguing that their in-court identification's not reliable. He's basically saying they were influenced by the courtroom setting itself.
Okay, so let's break it down. What happened with Plowden?
All right, so Plowden, he'd been shown these photo arrays before, sets of photos of potential suspects.
Line up, but pictures. Got it.
Exactly. And he could not positively identify Leardam
Right.
from those photos.
Yeah.
In fact, he even picked someone else entirely.
Whoa. Okay, so red flag number 1.
Right. But he did say at the time, he's like, look, I'd rather see these guys in person. The photos weren't clear enough, so they get to court. And Leardam's lawyer totally objects to him making an identification right there in the courtroom. Understandable.
Oh, yeah. I mean, talk about putting someone on the spot.
Right. You've got Leardam sitting right there next to his attorney. It's suggestive.
Totally.
So the court's like, okay, let's hold a Wade hearing.
A Wade hearing. Is that like a legal term for a timeout?
Kind of. It's basically a midi hearing within the trial. The judge listens to arguments and looks at evidence to decide if an identification was fair. Was it overly suggestive or not?
Got it. Like a safeguard.
Exactly. So during this Wade hearing, Plowden, he is adamant. He's like, no, I got a good look at Leardam during the crime. He said he saw his face when he woke up in that hotel room.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Leardam was pointing a gun at him. Even though Leardam told him not to look at him, Plowden's like, nope, I saw you again later after I got some of the duct tape off my eyes.
I can't even imagine. But how much can you trust a memory made under that kind of stress? And what about that photo array where he pointed to the wrong guy?
Right. Those are the million-dollar questions. And that's what the court had to grapple with. They're looking at the photo arrays. They're thinking about how long he saw him, the circumstances, all of it.
Yeah.
And they ultimately decided to allow the in-court identification.
Really? Even with all of that?
They did. They were convinced that he had enough of a chance to see Leardam during the crime, and that photo array didn't totally invalidate this in-court ID, especially because he was so sure.
Wow. Okay, what about the taxi driver, Mbeng? That feels even more iffy, right? He hadn't even seen photos.
Exactly. He's never seen a photo of Leardam before. So Leardam's lawyer is arguing that, come on, this is way too suggestive. He's never even seen him in a lineup before.
Did they at least do a lineup then? Just to be sure.
They didn't. And this is where it gets interesting. They actually pointed out that Leardam hadn't filed any pretrial motions about Mbengi's potential identification.
So, because it wasn't addressed before, it's like it didn't matter.
Basically. Plus, they said there was no legal precedent that said a witness who had spent significant time with a suspect couldn't make an in-court identification.
So, even though he'd been with him in the taxi hours, presumably, they're saying that doesn't make it less reliable.
That's how they saw it. It's tricky, right? Because you could also argue the opposite. If you've been with someone for hours, maybe that makes it harder to separate them from the stressful event itself.
Right, like your memory gets muddled.
Exactly. And this goes to a broader point about eyewitness testimony. Our memories, they're not always as reliable as we think they are. And these identification procedures, they can really influence what we think we remember.
Man, this is making me question everything.
Right. It's fascinating and a little unsettling.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, they did let Mbeng make that in-court ID.
Wow, okay.
And just like with Plowden, the appeals court, they sided with the trial court. They emphasized that the jury, they would have been given those standard instructions about eyewitness testimony, like don't put too much stock in in-court identifications.
Okay, so 2 claims down, and so far not looking good for Leardam. This next one, though, claim 3. This is where we really get into the weeds. We're talking hearsay. right to confront your accuser. And that whole joint trial thing comes back to bite us. Hit me. Okay, so claim 3, this is where we're getting into hearsay and what was it? Right to confront your accusers.
Right to confront your accuser.
Which feels like a pretty big deal.
It is. And you know that joint trial we talked about? It rears its ugly head again.
I knew it. Okay, what happened?
So because Leardam and Wingate were tried together, the prosecution was able to use some statements that Wingate had made to other people.
Oh, like things he had said about the robbery plan?
Yep, exactly. But here's the thing. Wingate, he never actually took the stand himself.
So they're just using his words against Leardam even though he's not there to, like, defend himself?
That's what Leardam's arguing. He's saying that because he couldn't cross-examine Wingate about these statements, it violated his Sixth Amendment right to confront his accuser.
Which, yeah, seems pretty fundamental to me. If someone's going to use your words against someone else, you should get to be like, hey, wait a minute, that's not exactly what I meant, or whatever.
Exactly. But here's the catch. And you knew there was going to be a catch, right? There's an exception to that whole hearsay rule when it comes to statements made by, get this, co-conspirators.
Co-conspirators. So basically, if you can prove they were in on it together.
Exactly. If someone says something in furtherance of a conspiracy or a crime that you're both involved in, then boom, those words can be used against you, even if that person never takes the stand.
Wow. That's a pretty big exception.
It is. So in Leardam's case, the court really leaned on the fact that there was already a lot of evidence suggesting a conspiracy. You know, you had Leardam, Wingate, and Conway. They each had their own reasons for wanting to rob Plowden. Their actions, they all lined up with this plan.
So the court's like, look, we're convinced they were all in cahoots, so these statements are fair game.
Pretty much. They even said that even if admitting some of Wingate's statements was an error, it wasn't a big enough error to overturn the whole thing. Because remember, there was other evidence pointing to Leardam's guilt.
Okay, so they're basically saying, yeah, maybe we bent the rules a little, but it doesn't really matter because he was guilty anyway.
That's a bit of a simplification, but you're not far off.
Okay. Moving on. Claim 4. This one always blows my mind. Leardam's claiming his own trial lawyer was ineffective.
Yeah, it's not uncommon. It's a bold strategy for sure. Because to actually win on that claim, you have to prove that your lawyer messed up so badly that it actually changed the outcome of the trial.
So high bar to clear. What his lawyer do that was so awful?
Well, according to Leardam, his lawyer basically promised the jury that she would bring in these witnesses who could point the finger at other potential suspects. But then she never did.
Oh, so classic. Someone else did it, defense, but she didn't have the witnesses to back it up.
Right. It's the same group of people she mentioned in her opening statement: Castro, Neves, Cruz, and Blancaneaux. I know, a lot of names to keep track of.
It's like a bad soap opera up in here.
Right. Leardam says these witnesses, their testimony would have shown that there were other people with motives to rob Plowden and Taylor, that the cops just had tunnel vision on them.
Okay, so what happened? Did these witnesses disappear, fall off the face of the earth?
You'd think there'd be a more dramatic story, right? Like they're all on a beach somewhere sipping Mai Tais.
Yeah.
But honestly, the court records are really vague about why they didn't testify. We know Leardam's lawyer told the judge she couldn't find at least one of them, but that's about it.
Really? That's all we get.
It's frustrating,
Yeah.
right? But the court, they kind of glossed over it. They said that, first of all, his lawyer didn't actually make any promises about what these witnesses would say, just that the jury would hear from them. And secondly, even though those specific people didn't testify, the jury did hear testimony from Neves that confirmed these other folks had at least talked about robbing Plowden at some point.
So it wasn't a total blackout of information, just not from those specific people.
Right. It's a fine line. And in the end, the appeals court decided that the missing witnesses, it wasn't enough to make the trial unfair.
Okay, so 2 claims left. What's next?
Claim 5 is interesting. Leardam's arguing that the lawyer who represented him in his first appeal attempt, remember I said this was separate from the direct appeal, he's saying that lawyer was ineffective too.
Wait, so both his lawyers were incompetent? Is he just really bad at picking lawyers, or is something fishy going on here?
Right. You have to wonder. Anyway, this time he's saying the lawyer messed up by not getting those affidavits from his alibi witnesses.
The alibi witnesses, didn't we already establish those were kind of shaky?
Yeah, the court wasn't buying it the first time around. That's why I said this claim feels a little repetitive. And the court basically agreed. They pointed out that there's no constitutional right to a lawyer for those post-conviction relief proceedings. So even if the lawyer had made mistakes, which, by the way, they didn't actually rule on, it wouldn't automatically invalidate the outcome.
So even if he tripped on his shoelaces and fell flat on his face, it wouldn't have mattered.
Pretty much. Okay, last claim, Claim 6. Leerdam saying he was denied due process because the courts denied his requests for hearings.
Hearings about what?
Hearings related to his post-conviction relief petition and also a separate motion for a new trial, both of them based on those alibi witnesses again.
Okay. So he's not directly arguing those claims anymore. He's arguing about the process itself. Like, he didn't get a fair shot to make his case.
Exactly. He's saying, hey, even if you don't believe my alibi defense, and I know you don't, at least give me a chance to properly present those arguments. He's shifting the focus from the outcome to the process.
Okay, I get it. So what did the court say?
Not what he wanted to hear. They said this kind of procedural argument, it doesn't usually fly in a habeas corpus petition. Which, remember, that's about whether someone's being detained illegally, meaning their constitutional rights were violated in a way that put them in prison.
So this is more about how his appeals were handled, which doesn't fit neatly into that habeas box.
Exactly. And even if they did consider the argument, they weren't convinced that a hearing would have changed anything. They already decided those alibi witnesses weren't strong enough to justify a new trial. End of story.
Wow. So there you have it. 6 claims, 6 swings, and he struck out every time. This case is a wild ride, I'm not going to lie. It's one thing to talk about these legal concepts, but seeing them play out in a real case with such high stakes, it's really something else.
It makes you think, right?
Yeah.
This wasn't just about whether one guy was guilty or innocent. It raises all these questions about how our justice system works, how much we can trust eyewitness testimony, what happens when you have a joint trial. It's complicated.
It's super complicated, and for anyone listening, I think that's something to really sit with. This case might be closed, but this conversation about justice, that is far from over. Until next time, everybody, keep diving deep.